Welcome everyone to the Keynote segment of TR's 2021 Investor Day. I'm delighted to have with me our distinguished guest, Ronnie Chan, Chair of Hong Kong-listed Hang Lung Properties, which is a top-tier real estate developer founded over 60 years ago. Ronnie has been a significant investor and entrepreneur in China for over 3 decades. He had the foresight to expand Hang Lung's business into mainland China in 1992, and today the company owns and manages 2 million square meters of commercial property in major Chinese cities, including Shanghai, Tianjin, and Hangzhou. Ronnie is also co-founder of Morningside, a private investment group with extensive venture, PE, and property holdings spanning the US, Europe, China, and Southeast Asia. Notably, Ronnie was an early investor in some of the most successful Chinese tech companies, including Ctrip and Xiaomi. Ronnie is an internationally recognized philanthropist. The Morningside Foundation's $350 million donation to endow the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health was the largest in Harvard's history at the time and sparked subsequent gifts to the university. Ronnie also has a deep understanding of both the West and China and is active in numerous advisory bodies and universities across the globe. He is a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and a member of both the U.S. Council on Foreign Relations and the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations. Ronnie, on behalf of TR and our partners, welcome, and thank you for joining us for this conversation on investing in China.
Pleasure.
Let's start by going back 20 years. You were one of the earliest venture investors in TMT in China, and at the time, the country only had a 2% internet penetration rate. What prompted you to even start looking at tech investments in China at that stage? And more importantly, will you continue to invest going forward? And if so, where do you see the best opportunities?
Well, if you say go back 20 years, it's a little bit unfair. So let me go back 30 years. When it was around 1991 that I decided to enter into the mainland market after 2 years of intensive research. And at that time, I came to the conclusion that China's economic opening was probably irreversible. And as we went on during the 1990s, we saw how fast the pickup was. I began to realize that perhaps we were seeing one of the greatest economic miracles that mankind has ever seen. I think the last time that mankind have seen anything like that was probably after World War II, when in Europe and Japan, everything was destroyed, and so you have to start over anew. And we saw a similar opportunity in the mainland of China, and moreover, the drive of not just the government under Deng Xiaoping was amazing, but the people, after Cultural Revolution, after a lot of suffering, really, really want to improve their livelihood. So I think that that gave us some confidence, and after 10 years of operating there, so by 20 years ago, roughly 2000, we began to invest in a lot of these high-tech companies, as you mentioned, and that has been very profitable. Will I continue to invest in China? You bet. Frankly, I look around the world. You know, over the last 30-some years, I've invested in many countries in Europe, US, and Southeast Asia. I just don't see a market that is as attractive as China not just was, but China is and will likely remain in the next 5, 10, 20 years. So yeah, I'll be investing there.
Maybe to pick up on that a little bit, you know, as you've alluded to, you also have extensive investments in US, Western Europe, ranging from control investments in US industrial businesses to biotech ventures. What would you say are the differences, if any, in your approach towards making investments in China versus the West? And are there any sort of mistakes that you learned along the way that you try to avoid going forward?
Let me first say this, if I may, Nathan. I think the 2 best places to invest in the world in the coming 10 years, 15 years, will likely be the United States and China. Both are being very big markets, and both are quite stable, quite steady. And in the case of China, the growth rate will likely be still quite good, maybe 5-6% per annum. And so I think that that should still be a good market. What are the differences of investing in both places, you asked? Well, first of all, 30 years ago, it was very different. 20 years ago, it was still very different. 10 years ago, beginning to converge. And today, I would say it is much more akin to each other than 10, 20, 30 years ago. That said, the system is still very different, and so it will never fully converge. And that's good and it's not good. If you know what you're doing, then that market actually can be quite predictable in some ways. There's always policy risk. The government can always change their policies. So there you have to be careful. But basically, you more or less know what is coming. I'll cite you one example. A lot of people say, hey, what is this common prosperity, right? I thought about it and I said, hey, wait a second. Deng Xiaoping told us about it 30, 40 years ago. Let some people get wealthy first. And so if you are not warned, if you are not told, then you shouldn't be investing in China to start with. Because the leaders told you a long time ago. You may say, why now? That's another issue, right? But it's sooner or later, it's going to come. So I think that in that sense, it's quite predictable.
So maybe to pick up then on another point that you brought up, common prosperity, which I was going to bring up as well. I think suffice to say some of the news headlines coming out of China recently have been alarming for a lot of investors and some of the audience. So we've seen, for example, Ant Financial's IPO being pulled in the last minute, high-profile regulatory actions being taken against some of the large tech players in China, after-school tuition sector being wiped out. So what are your thoughts on some of the investors sort of taking the opposite path to what you just said in the very beginning? So some people are saying China is now uninvestable. What do you think about that? Or put another way, is China turning against successful entrepreneurs and investors like yourself?
I don't think the Chinese leaders are that stupid. Those guys are, pardon my language, damn smart. And there's a reason why they're doing what they are doing. And you have to be objective to look at it and understand most likely why they are doing that. And once you understand that, then you may come around to their perspective and agree with them. And oftentimes I do. The way they do things sometimes is a little bit on the rough side at times. But the objective is usually very clear. For example, Ant Financial that you mentioned. No industry, no country can let a para-financial system, shall I say, evolve in an uncontrolled way. And as we all know, the internet is something still relatively new to mankind anywhere. Regulation is light, and cross-border regulation is almost non-existent. And so within a country, for the economic and in particular financial health of the system, the leaders has to prevent certain potentially very bad things from happening, in my opinion. Financial has that definite possibility of something really getting out of hand. What I don't know is why did they allow it to get to such a close to IPO before they act. They should have acted, in my opinion, a lot earlier. Ironically, that day, some of the top Alibaba guys were supposed to have lunch with me right here in this room. Didn't show.
No wonder.
No wonder. So I only knew about it until 8 p.m. that day. But anyway, so you take Ant Financial, for example. You may say, hey, you lost an opportunity to make money. That's true. But on the other hand, if the economy, if the financial market is going to be in serious trouble by allowing it to go ahead, then I would forego whatever profit I may or may not make in the short run and say, hey, it's important for the economy and the financial market to remain healthy in the longer term. So, a lot of these, the tech companies, frankly, Nathan, maybe I'm a little bit socially and morally a little bit conservative. It scared the heck out of me when these days, you put a chip in your eyes like a contact lens and then you enter into a virtual world. Many top universities in America have 60 to 70% of the undergraduate need some form of mental, some kind of form of counseling. And that is a sign to us that the world is not moving in the right direction. And a lot of it has to do with the internet. Now, you cannot completely control. Technology, you cannot reverse it, usually. And it has done a lot of good to society and to the efficiency of the economy and so forth. So it should go on in a particular direction. But on the other hand, if you let that, shall I say, beast out that is totally without restraint, I think mankind will suffer. I believe that the leaders of China figured that one out and said, if it is purely, shall I say, capitalism, where everything goes, then where will that lead a community, a society, a nation, or a people? And so to me, a responsible government that has the means to do that should do that. Are they against capitalists? I said, are you crazy? When they were against the capitalists before the economic opening in 1979, they were poor. And they know it. It's because of the adoption of the market economy that enabled them to amass the wealth. So for some people to, overreact and say they're turning the other direction, I said, these guys don't deserve to make money as far as I'm concerned. They don't have a common sense, and they know nothing about China. And so I don't think that, if you do business legitimately and in reasonable business, because some of them are, for national security reasons, for example. A foreigner try to own an airline or a telecom company or even a bank in America would have a little bit of challenges, right? You're a lawyer, so you know better than I do. So in mainland China, you have a very similar situation. But to me, the high-tech sector, whereas we all know all the goods of it, but as Bill Gates once said, he's amazed how come so many smart people, there are not more smart people that focus on the potential downside. So I think that the Chinese government is doing the right thing that I think eventually many of the Western countries may have to follow suit. Because they will figure out that the mental health cost for society is going to be so crazily big. And the cause of it is because of, to a good extent, because of the internet. And so I think China is doing the right thing. People don't like it. I know that. A lot of my friends are investing in there. Some of them found a company, educational company, and this and that, right? They have a reason why they are doing that. As I said, some of the means that they use may be a little bit unpalatable to some people, but I think the overall objective is usually the right one.
So turning now then to another topic that's sort of quite close to my heart, and I think your heart as well as TR's, given, we're rooted in Hong Kong as well, not quite as long as Hang Lung. But, what would you say to some who are commenting nowadays that, Hong Kong has a very dim future?
Well, Hong Kong's future, in my opinion, is certainly not as bright as 20, 30 years ago. But to bet against Hong Kong will also be a very, very dicey thing. Why is it not as good as before? Well, a lot of mainland China loved Hong Kong for decades. And they love to come to Hong Kong and spend money. And Hong Kong, some people don't like them. And in fact, they were so violent against mainland Chinese people. And, when you don't want to work hard, you are usually jealous about those who work hard and make it. And so a lot of these young kids in Hong Kong being radicalized by some quarters, and they don't, and I've been saying this for 20 some years, that they don't want to advance, they don't want to study, they don't want to, learn more. And so what do you do with such people? An entitlement mentality has come in since 1997, and then they are further radicalized. And it got so bad in 2019 that I've never felt threatened in Hong Kong, my safety, until 2019. So the Chinese guys, mainland Chinese guys are saying, hey, I come here to spend money. You don't want my money? I go somewhere else. So, and will those money come back anytime soon? Probably not. And that's one of the fundamental reasons I believe that Hong Kong has really cut down our own potential for economically. But that said, think about 2 or 3 things. Number one, the financial service market is still very, very strong. Our IPO is still among number 1, number 2 in the world. And mainland companies coming, high-tech companies coming, biotech companies coming. So the financial service is still very, very strong. And then it filters down to all the professionals, the lawyers, the accountants, and so forth. That's one thing. The other thing is the Greater Bay Area in mainland China. The central government is paying a lot of attention to the Greater Bay Area, which is right next to Hong Kong. And I can go to the Shenzhen airport in 1 hour and 5 minutes. And in fact, before pandemics, I regularly go to Shenzhen airport to take planes to other cities in mainland China, not because the ticket is cheaper. To me, it doesn't matter that much. But because there's so many more flights. So, that's part of the Greater Bay. And so do Hong Kong people want to take advantage of it? I said in the 50s and 60s, we rely on the United States to make money. In the 60s and 70s, we rely on Europe. In the 70s and 80s, we rely on Japan, right? And then the 4 little tigers, Southeast Asia, and then everybody started coming. And in the last 30 years, where does the money come from? Mainland China.
Fantastic. So one last question. You're a successful businessman in your own right, and you've also backed some of the best Chinese founders in tech and internet over the past 20 years. What would you say are some of the characteristics or traits that you look out for before backing an entrepreneur?
People don't know this, but Lei Jun, the founder of Xiaomi, founded 3 or 4 companies before he founded Xiaomi.
Absolutely.
And we were investing in most of those. Right?
So you knew him well already.
Right. YY and many others. Right? And, many people know, Neil Shang and Sequoia and this and that. And, when the guy started C-Trip, we were already an investor. So these people over a long period of time. That they're honorable people, they're smart people, they're shrewd people, and they are really, some of them really know how to think out of the box. And so, it's not that difficult to bet on people who already have a good track record, right? So I think that it's not that difficult. Of course, there's always some new hotshot come around with a new idea, right? So those are a little bit harder to decide. But on the other hand, you're not betting the farm. You just put in a little bit of money with some of these guys, and you don't know who will. We have some idea after a while who may be a winner, and who may be a big winner, and who may be a big winner.
Generally, time doesn't lie.
Right. Exactly.
Well, Ronnie, thank you again for taking the time for a very insightful conversation. I learn something new every time. And we look forward very much to welcoming you back at one of our physical investor days in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan.